down in the Gulf Coast. Leanne can probably attest to this. Welcome everybody. Welcome everybody. We're just getting started talking about allergies right now, but we're gonna give everybody a couple of minutes to get in here, and then we're gonna get things kicked off. But Leanne's not far from me, so she can probably attest to the humidity and like the mustiness. Like I just feel like it leads to uh, allergies. People shouldn't live here, really, is what I'm saying.
At least not
And
in
I'm
the
from here.
summertime.
Yeah, definitely not in the summertime. It's already getting pretty hot. So I'm trying everything. Zyrtec, Sudafed, local honey. Does anybody else do local honey for allergies?
I've heard that. We do.
Yeah. I haven't started my own beehive yet, but that's the next step. Because as you can tell, like I'm going full like Civil War reenactor. So getting back to my roots.
That reminds me, Josh, of that pollen video y'all did a couple of years ago.
The
Whenever the
pollinating.
pollen is just, yeah, the pollen zombie type video. That was
I
hilarious.
need to see that.
I'll find a copy and post it in the comments because that is probably one of my favorite things of all time. And there are some lines in there, and I can't even think of what they are offhand. But it's with our nature center people. Educati is her stage name, but Katie Bugal, and she's just genuinely like a funny person and a ham. And so she really plays up those, but it's like a teaser for a horror flick that's about pollen landing on everything and causing allergies and stuff like that. Uh uh it's something, it's so ridiculous. And now that I think about it, I'm trying to remember if we even I don't think we ever even entered it for any Tammys or anything, and I should have done that because it's just so much fun.
Yeah, that was a good one.
Welcome everybody. We're just giving everybody a few minutes to get settled in here and talking about random things like allergies and pollen and things like that. Uh, and uh, we'll get started here in just a minute. I just remembered the line that she said in the pollinating. It was a spoof on "This is not a drill." She said, "This is not a Benadryl" or something like that. It's so good. So
Yeah.
I'll find a version of that and post it for everybody. Um, okay, it looks like we're sort of leveling out here. So we're gonna go ahead and kick things off, and then as people jump in, they can catch up with us. Welcome everybody to our April webinar here. I'm your moderator for today, Josh Lee. We're going to be talking today about how to build your team, especially in the face of a rapid evolution and the change that we all deal with. So thankfully, Maggie Holman here has been really instrumental in putting together such a great group for you all to hear from. And I'm going to let her kick it off in just a second so she has as much time as possible. But I want to cover a couple of housekeeping things first. If you have questions, please use the question and answer widget within Zoom. That way we can go and get those answered. I'll follow up at the end with those questions so we can ask everybody here. Please definitely use the chat. I still need recommendations on allergy medication, so that's also very helpful there. But use the chat and get involved in the conversation. Um, and we are also recording this session. We do that every time so that, or as much as possible, the DOJ wouldn't let us record theirs because, attorneys. But most of them we record so we can have them after the fact. We'll have it on our webinar page on the Tamio Listens website. So feel free to go back and check it out there. And also there's places there where you can submit your feedback, especially for webinar content. We always want to know what people want to hear about and what topics are important for you all as members out there. And then finally, just shameless plug. Oh, Amanda. Thanks, Amanda. She from Seabrook. She said text clear from HEB. So HEB for the win again. I'll give that a try. Finally, the upcoming conference. It's in June. Today is not the last day to register, but it is the last day to register to guarantee your shirt size. We did another custom design this year. It's going to be fantastic with our friends from Local Legends up in the Panhandle. It's probably one of my favorite parts of this whole thing. So get registered today so you can secure your shirt size. Even if you don't register today, you will get a shirt. I just can't guarantee that it's going to be the size that you want. So with all of that out of the way, Maggie, it's all yours.
Thank you so much, Josh. Well, it's really excited to be here today, like Josh said, to talk about this topic, building your team. This webinar will cover two main topics, which is, how are we building teams? How are we adding people to our teams? But also, how are we restructuring, when change comes upon us? So we have a lot of great panelists here. We're going to in a minute, let them introduce ourselves. Then we're going to open up to kind of some questions we've pre-prepared for all of them. And then after that, at the end of the session, we'll go through your questions. So please make sure you're dropping those questions in the question and answer box in the chat, and we look forward to getting to all of them. And also, after the webinar, we look forward to sharing with you a little bit more what our team structures look like, so that if you're looking for inspiration via org chart, that's something that's available to you. So like to go ahead and kick off the introductions with Chelsea.
Hi, everybody. My name is Chelsea April. I work for the city of Allen, which is a suburb north of Dallas in Collin County, Texas. I have been with the city for 10 years now. I started when our team, our public and media relations team, was 5 people, and I was the most junior person on it. And 10 years later, we are a team of 12, and I'm the director. That's a new development. It happened last year around this time. And so during that period of change and transition, we were able to add a staff member and restructure a little bit. So look forward to hearing from the amazing panelists and sharing my experiences with you.
Hi, everyone. I'm Heather Bates. I'm the Director of Communications and Marketing at the City of Temple. Temple is right between Austin and Waco. We started about 6 years ago with our centralized communications and marketing department in 2019. As a team of 2, and now we have communications and marketing, events, tourism, and a convention center, and we're about 25 to 30 people. And I'm also really excited to get to talk to y'all about some of our experiences.
Hi, everyone. My name is Isis Lopez. I am from the city of Austin, specifically for a department called Development Services. We help permit buildings. I am the engagement manager there, and the structure, I am a co-manager with Maggie. She's in charge of communications, and I'm in charge of engagement, so community engagement and relationship building. We are one of 50 departments, so there are about 50 different variations of us. And one of the major things that I feel we can bring to this panel is we recently had a major restructure where we had 2 departments merge. And so figuring out how to work together, how to reclassify or how to reposition in a way that makes sense. Good to see everyone.
Hi, Leanne Peterson. I'm with the Woodlands Township. I've been with the township about 2 years now as Director of Communications. Prior to that, I was with the city of Seabrook for almost 12 years. And prior to that, with the city of Midland for 6 years. So I'm right on that almost 20-year mark now in municipal communication, and I've had several roles throughout the years. But in Seabrook, I was a 1-person shop and then eventually became a 3-person shop, back down to 2. And then right before I left, it was going back up to 3. But here at the township, I manage 8 other people, and we have some more growth within the next 5 to 10 years that we've put in our plan. So just really excited to be here.
Thank you all so much. And of course, my name is Maggie Pullman. I am a communications manager with the city of Austin, and I will be your moderator today. So starting off with our first question, as we talk about building teams from scratch. So let's start with Leanne. How did you determine what roles you needed as you started building your team?
So when I came on with the township, it was a pretty unique situation in that they had actually split. They had tourism and communications in one area. And so I really kind of came in, was able to build the team up a little bit, add some new roles. But really what I looked at first was what type of work requests are we getting throughout the year? How in demand are those services? How long does it take to do those certain projects? And then I also held I did it the first time in 2023, but basically a strategic planning meeting with the other departments to identify what their needs were for the upcoming year. And resounding, it was video. Everybody wanted video. So video was actually one of the first positions that I added whenever I came on board, and then we're slated to have another video position come on board in 2026. So really kind of evaluating what the needs are for your departments and the demand that you have on your department.
Chelsea, how would you add to that with your experience?
Sure. I think one of the most useful tools, if your city has this, is looking at your council strategic plan. Not every city will maintain one of those or keep it updated, but that really gives you great insight into what your elected officials want in the long term to see in their city government. And I think this gives you really good insight into the types of functions that your department may serve in assisting those things. One great example of this, one of our council's 5 strategic goals currently is an engaged and connected Allen community. And their desire for more public input, more public outreach, and more in-person opportunities for feedback led us to actually add a position that was approved in the last budget year. So I think those can help give that really great advocacy for adding to the department or changing up roles.
That leads really well into another question, which is how do we start having those conversations, right? So like for you, Heather, where are some of those conversations come from about creating new roles, and what are you looking at as you kind of build that case?
So for Temple, it really started with a strategic planning retreat that our council did in 2018. During that retreat, there was an overarching theme from council and city leadership that we just needed better communications. We needed to be better telling our story. And so that really was the trigger for all the things that happened after that. So we had a communications audit done by a consultant. They came in, they had conversations with key leadership, department heads, council, and then with my team that I had at the time, because I did have a small team at that time, and they just tried to identify gaps and opportunities and ways things could be improved, and then also made recommendations based on the city strategic plan, like Chelsea had mentioned, and based on the strategic communications plan that we had, where we could add staff and how we could justify some of the needs that we had.
How did that audit experience shape the roles that you ended up asking for?
The audit was super helpful. It really helped to define and formalize what we felt our needs were at the time, and what staff felt that their needs were at the time. But the audit was super helpful because it helped formalize it. And then additionally, it gave us a little bit of direction, because we all knew, like, okay, we need help putting out this newsletter that council really wants to do, or we need help like doing more on social or getting more video. And the audit really helped to clearly define that, and then help put some steps in motion for us after it was complete.
Isis, how would you speak to both the determination of roles as well as that conversation as it pertains to your experiences here in Austin?
I think one of the things I've seen also, in addition to, what our colleagues said, what Chelsea and Heather have mentioned, is the use of data. And so especially if you're very department specific, if you're taking a look at number of requests that are made or any gaps in the operational data. So let's say you work for a specific department. I worked in what was code compliance, the folks who help make sure that the grass is cut and that there's hot water in apartment complexes, taking a look at like how many complaints are made, and also like media requests. And so anything that like data might be able to help to say like there is a need and here's the numbers that show that need, would be, I think, something that I would add to as you're building your justification would be helpful.
Yeah, we did that as well for graphic design requests. Was one to justify our graphic designer. We developed a service request form where city staff have to fill it out before they request any graphic design collateral. They also are supposed to do it for videos. video requests and media release requests. So that form kind of helps not only formalize that process and make it more organized, but also have that data as well.
I think it can also help if you are currently contracting for any of those services. Make sure that you're comparing the cost of contracting against the cost of just having a full-time or a part-time staff member. Often those are really comparable. And if your city management is open to adding a position, maybe something that they would look at and could be a cost savings.
Mm-hmm.
Leanne, how about your experience with starting that conversation? Anything else you'd like to add there?
Well, I mean, everybody's hit on it, making sure that you have these forms, you're comparing. Chelsea, you really hit what I was going to say about that too, because it's one of the best ways to show what you need. And again, I keep going back to video production, and I don't know if my video producer is watching right now or not. But if I was to outsource a video, it would be not only thousands of dollars, but it also adds to the timeline. This is something that they can do pretty much immediately if you have them on staff. And then we also did that just recently with a graphic design position as well that we just added, because we kept seeing people outsource that to other agencies or people. And now we have that service in-house, and all of our departments are super excited about it.
Fantastic. So the kind of next question is more once you've started building your team up. So what are, how did you create opportunities for growth within your structure, or either with people who are already there or with creating future opportunities through kind of like a middle management structure? Heather, do you want to start us out?
Yeah, so the way that our department is structured, I try to be really intentional with. So we have entry-level positions. I know some places call them coordinators, some places call them specialists, but we start with specialists, and that's sort of the entry-level position into our department. Then from there, the kind of career ladder goes coordinator, manager, division director, assistant director, director. So it was really important that I had a structure in place that would allow for growth. Additionally, as far as allowing opportunities for growth in the department, we focus heavily on cross-training. So even though I have a department of very specialized divisions who all focus on their areas of expertise, they also cross-train for obvious reasons if someone's out and that kind of thing. But additionally, it's a big deal from a growth perspective for the staff. So it benefits them and their professional and personal growth, but also the organization. I think is a big deal. And then lastly, what I was going to say about growth is time staff, especially, people who are posting on social media every day, or people who are running out and getting content, taking photos, videos. It might be hard for them to feel connected to the vision and the why of city government and how we're a public servant. And so I think we have a department retreat every year that I do. And I always do a presentation and try and tie everything back, and how what we do is important. And I think connecting the vision to what they do every day also, it might not be a direct growth opportunity, but I think that helps them see that what they do, everything matters, and they're valued in the organization.
So at the beginning of your answer, you talked a little bit about job titles. So how did you pick which titles were right for you out of all the options, like you said, that are out there?
Yeah, so I know we talked earlier before the call, but I when I was building our department, I did a lot of research, a lot of org charts, a lot of Google, obviously ChatGPT now you can use. And what we found was, me and the city manager and other leadership who were involved, were that all cities' org charts are different, and there's not one. So I was really looking for okay, who's best going to fit our needs? Because our strategic plan and our strategic communications plan and our audit, those kind of were the foundations to say, okay, based on those things, this is what we need. This is how we could be structured. So I was really hoping to find a city where I could just go, okay, I need these positions and this is a fit for us. But that did not happen, and I wouldn't expect that to happen for anybody, but they are good tools. And so that's just kind of what I did, was use our plans and assessments and things that we had in place to figure out what type of level of position we needed and what responsibilities and functions that they would have.
So Chelsea, tell us a little bit about what kind of that growth and what that change and what that org chart looks like for y'all.
Sure. And before I do that, I want to bounce off something Heather said. A lot of our cities will use comparison data when creating like pay bands for our city. So that could be another source to look at, especially if you want to make sure that you're paying within the market. Sometimes HR is picky about those job titles looking similar. Sometimes they are not. So that's another thing to look at. When it came to growing and kind of defining the titles at City of Allen, definitely career ladder growth was something that was top of my mind. When I took this job as director, we had several more specialized positions. So we had a senior web content specialist, we had a senior social media specialist. And one of the things I recognized is when we had really accomplished women in those positions, but they were very specialized in their role, and it made it more difficult for them to potentially take on another layer of managing staff who did multiple things. And so luckily we were able to do some cross training, but we did wind up leaving or losing an employee who left for a position that allowed more freedom and flexibility. And so instead of having those more specialized positions, now we have kind of differentiation in titles. So it's a communication manager, it's a senior communication specialist, communication coordinator. And so while everybody's kind of found their niche depending on what they like to do, there's a lot of cross training. So we know that if one person is out of the office that week, that someone else can easily step in to fulfill that job function, and we don't lose any level of service to our customers.
Leanne, on your team, do y'all lean more towards the specialized or the general, like Chelsea was just mentioning, and how do y'all in general plan for growth, and how has that changed based on maybe some of the previous cities you've been in?
Yeah, it's been a little different here. When I came on board, it was kind of the vague, where we had communication specialist, we had senior comm specialist, and then just regular comm specialist, communications manager. And then we were actually outsourcing and contracting social media. But all of our departments were coming to us with very specialized things. And so we went the opposite direction in that we created the social media role and the video role and now the graphic design role. And as far as growth goes, just really supporting each one of those positions, knowing that you can add, senior to titles and adjusting job descriptions. And if I had the best org chart in the world, or, I could add as many people as I want to my team, I would have a video manager, a social media manager, and all those other positions. And maybe one day we can get to something like that. But we are adding a new role right now called a digital media lead, where that position is going to work really closely with our social media strategist and our video producer, and helping content where they might not be able to make content because they're in such high demand. But that one is more, we're trying to make it more into eventually a management role that would somewhat manage those digital services.
Is kind of going off what Heather and Chelsea and Leanne have talked about. I know our structure for requesting new positions in Austin is pretty regimented, and so are the job descriptions. So how do you work? Have you worked within that system to really find that flexibility and get what you need in a role as you add it? And what are some of those, how does that really impact you?
Yeah, I think depending on each municipality, the city of Austin in particular is very structured. There's a set of titles that already exist that you get to pick from. And then getting a position could mean potentially raising fees that, it requires larger implications. So you really have to justify it in terms of impact to the operations, not just requests. So it'd be how are you really making a difference with this position? And so within that structure, I feel for opportunities to grow as an individual contributor, I will say, even if it's very specialized or generalized. I think if you are like listening and you are perhaps an individual contributor, one thing that I did in particular was be curious. Like I was naturally curious of like, I am so curious. My background is in communications and marketing. But I was naturally curious about like engagement. And so I'm like, let me go to these community meetings and like learn more about it. And so I got more experience there. I was curious about social media. I was curious about those things. And so having that, not discouraging that natural curiosity, because that kind of unofficially develops your strength for and knowledge for those areas. And then, but as a manager, as you are strengthening your team, sometimes like Chelsea, you kind of have to make sure that you have coverage. And so that might mean, as wild as it sounds, having your graphic designer answer media questions sometimes, but making sure that they're trained for it. And then having like different levels of like, okay, maybe not for like the super, like high profile ones, but just general questions, or just being like, hey, we'll get to you tomorrow. Do you have a deadline? But that kind of exposes them, and that exposes them to like, do you like this? Do you not like this? And so being able to cross-train, I think, is an opportunity for growth when you are so limited. And then I would advocate that if you are curious, that also kind of helps build your knowledge to potentially for like management opportunities, because you kind of at least got a taste of what it took.
I think that leads really well into my next question, which is, we've kind of talked about org charts and job titles a little bit, but do you have any advice on how to build out that job description, starting with Leanne?
So talking to especially the people that have been doing the job, figure out what they are doing, and then filling in those gaps again. What is the high demand and things like that? I always look at other cities and how they organize their job descriptions. And again, you do have to work with HR. That's another really big one. But making sure that all of the responsibilities, or at least as many as you can possibly fit, are in the job description. I know we all have that other responsibilities as assigned thing in our job descriptions, but that can be really vague. And then when someone is put something on their plate and they're not really ready for it or something like that, it might not go so well. So just really looking at and talking to other cities and what they're doing and what's working for them and what you really need is really important to building those teams from scratch. I took a lot of time with the digital media lead. We had a person leave. It was a project manager role that was doing a little bit of everything, but not very much digital media. And so really crafting, I took the video producer role, I took the social media strategist role, and kind of made one job description out of that. So anytime you have someone leave or someone coming on board, it's that opportunity to look at that job description again. It's a really great time to do that.
Well said. Anybody else have anything else to add to that question? All right.
I would say just one tactical, like time saver piece of advice is I have had great success with taking sample job descriptions. So a lot of cities will post all of their job descriptions, even the ones they aren't currently hiring for. So save those on a drive someplace or bookmark them on your web browser. But actually just pulling those into ChatGPT and saying, I like all of these. Can you draft me up a job description that looks like ours? And that has offered a really great starting point. Of course, it always needs fine tuning and editing, but if you're just staring at that blinking cursor, wondering where do I go next, that's a good place to start.
Absolutely. And then kind of to round out our conversation about building, really building teams from scratch, just want to hear from everyone real quick. What would be your advice to someone who's kind of in this phase where they're either, really getting to add some brand new positions or rapidly grow their team? Chelsea, if you want to start.
I would say be cautious about building job roles for the superstar on your team that you want to see stay. It makes it really difficult when that person may leave for whatever reason to refill that role. And sometimes that can be a really lengthy process in working with HR to rework that description and find a way to fill it. So make sure that you're writing a job description or creating positions that are really what is best for the structure of your organization, and not necessarily built around an individual.
Yeah, that's kind of our philosophy as well, is we always say build it for the position or the department, the organization, based on the needs and the gaps that you have versus the person in that role. I was also gonna add that I forgot to mention earlier when we were talking about justifying roles. One thing that has helped me often is to leverage other departments and get their support. So if you have a department who helps Parks and Rec a lot, or helps library a lot, or PD or whoever, talk to the department head or leadership in that department and get them to support that or endorse your requests, because that is also really helpful when the city manager's office and the budget team is reviewing those. I think it does make an impact to have outside department support.
I'll say for like a more regimented, like structured, we've mentioned how asking for positions and like maybe cities like the city of Austin might require like larger changes. One thing that we are asked to do is to do like a 5-year projection. And so sometimes we asked, or I remember I asked for like 5 positions, knowing like this is like the best thing I would do. And I got 1 out of those 5 positions. And so it wasn't necessarily that I was over asking. We definitely had the data to support that there was a need for that, but not being afraid to ask for the positions, even with all the limitations, because at the end of the day, the work is going to be there and the demand is going to be there. But not being afraid to be like, well, I need these 5, and maybe out of those 5, I will get 1, would be my advice.
I think for me, I'm actually going to kind of go into the interview process because you are building that team from scratch. Finding the right person is really hard sometimes. And one thing that's been very effective in the interview process for us, especially for the creative roles, is having some type of working interview. So whether that is a video producer position, creating a video, or our graphic designer position that we just filled, we got a computer together. They had 2 hours to complete the interview process. First hour was question and answer, and then the second hour was, build a couple of pages of a publication. And it was night and day with the applicants that we had, especially on that one. And I mean, at the end of that, it was a no-brainer who we wanted to hire for that position. And so people can talk all day long about what they want you to hear, but if you're really wanting to know how they work, draft something. And again, ChatGPT is a great resource for that. Create, just an assignment that they can do, whether they're taking it home or doing it at your facility. It's very, very useful.
That's all really, really great advice. I know I'm a big fan of the test as well during an interview. As we kind of turned a little bit more towards talking about restructuring, I know we're talking about this a little bit. Heather was talking about this a little bit in advice, but there are some opportunities to obviously bring positions over from other teams or other departments into your teams. What are some of the opportunities or challenges that presents, if you want to start, Heather?
The first one that comes to my mind is when we centralized, at first we had 2 positions brought over from Parks and Recreation. And as communicators, we all know that we do so much more than communicating. It's like other duties is assigned. So that was no different with these 2 staff that came over, who were really probably doing some Parks and Recreation admin type duties. And so one challenge that we had when the positions were transferred over to us was that the leadership in Parks and Rec said, okay, yeah, that's fine, but we don't want to lose any support. But really it was part admin support. It wasn't something a communications and marketing department would be doing. So having those conversations up front with leadership, or anybody who's going to be involved in the transition, is definitely something I would say, and getting their buy-in and having them understand why this is happening, because that is somewhere that in hindsight, I wish we did a little bit differently. So that was definitely a challenge. And then we had to have conversations of, well, they're not gonna scrub your address book list and your spreadsheets, and like, they're not gonna do some of these things. And so those conversations had to be had in a more difficult way than if we would have talked about those ahead of time and gotten their buy-in a little bit sooner.
Absolutely. Chelsea, what have been some of those opportunities and challenges for you?
Yeah, I love Heather's answer. I feel like she hit that friction. We also absorbed 2 marketing staff members from Parks and Recreation a few years ago, and those other duties as assigned are just that relationship where we're going to do a lot of internal projects versus more external facing projects. That was definitely a transition for our team too. I think the opportunities, when you have a more centralized team, one, I think there are opportunities for individual employees because they are more exposed to different functions of communication, marketing, and in some cases, public engagement, if your department does that as well. So it makes them a more well-rounded employee and allows them to grow with the organization. So I think that's an advantage just for internal staff. I think externally, it actually, we sometimes play like air traffic control to a lot of different functions happening in our city. And so we're actually able to help supplement and make better like a fire department program because we have knowledge over here about what's happening in Parks and Recreation on that same night or for that same audience. And so I think that's one huge benefit of having that centralized team is that we can grow and get better together and also help support our community in a more holistic way.
I see in the chat that we have someone who asked about if any of y'all handle police and fire public safety communication. So does anybody on the panel have experience with doing that restructuring, or like you said with Chelsea, with that, you mentioned the fire department, with some collaboration there with your public safety groups?
I do. I have I'm sorry, did you say Chelsea's name? Were you asking Chelsea?
I was asking whoever wanted. Feel free to, yeah.
Go for it, Heather.
Okay, so when we became centralized, this is a long story, so I'm gonna try and make it as short as I can. We ended up not overseeing PD, and then for reasons we started overseeing PD. They had 2 communicators at the time that we oversaw. They ended up leaving a few months, a year into the transition. And then we had one person basically do both of those jobs in communications. Well, fast forward to 2025, and doing the role of having the PD PIO be in the communications and marketing department. We have actually recently, like within the last month or 2, gone back to chief and his DCs and said, actually, we don't think this is working. And we do think that the PD PIO, for various reasons, should be back at PD. What we were doing was the PD PIO, once they hired someone, was doing media relations, and then communications and marketing was doing event photo support, getting content, posting on social media. So it was like media was in PD and marketing was in communications and marketing. And we've done that for about like a year and a half. It just doesn't work. There's too many gray areas, no matter how many SOPs or guidelines we put in place or anything like that. So we've done it both ways. And I do think it's best that it stays in PD, at least for us.
I would 100% agree with that. In Seabrook, I did handle PD and fire, and it's a different culture. With fire, was a volunteer fire department, so it was a little bit different. But with police, you're not the one that's, you're not getting the information from dispatch necessarily. And so it can be really hard to kind of break that barrier with them. And I always wanted to have a police PIO or have someone trained in that because it's just really different. It's a different culture when it comes to public safety, and they very much like to be identified as their own entities, even though they are a part of the city.
They do, and we found with our local media, at least here in Temple, that when they want an interview or something from PD, they want the uniform on camera, which is completely understandable. So having the civilian PIOs or us as the PIOs, it's a little bit, it's just, the needs are different for PD.
One of the things that we've done, even though in Allen it is separate, and I would also advocate for it staying that way, is we have a lot of ongoing meetings with our communications team in PD to ensure that we have kind of shared philosophies about social media best practices, that we are sharing information and providing resources. They do have a different culture and often different work experience that leads them to this role. And so being the supporter for this is how you write a press release in AP style, you may not have, been as familiar with that because you were out doing other more life-saving work. I think try to maintain those relationships, even if those structures stay separate.
Yeah, for sure.
Yeah, I think that brings up like the shared understanding. That brings up a point with the restructuring that we went through at ECs. And how did you kind of manage the changes in like different shared understandings and different processes and procedures when you saw those two groups come together?
In the city of Austin, sometimes you have, as I mentioned, we have about 50 different departments, and it is definitely not centralized. Each department is its own world, and we work toward, we have communities of practice, and we have net PIOs to try to have unison. But with that means that sometimes there's some restructuring, and that means that sometimes some departments get merged and separated. It happens all the time. In our case, I worked for code compliance. And Maggie, she was a PIO manager, comms manager for development services. And so there was a big change where both of us had to merge. And so for context, development services is it was about like 500 employees, and code compliance was less than 200, so about 170, I think it was. And we had our own, I was PIO and marketing manager, and so was Maggie. We had the exact same title. And I did both comms and engagement. The way that development services was structured, it was separate. And so it helps to have conversations with your counterpart, Maggie and I. When you have that large of a department, there's a lot of different entities that work with each other. So Chelsea mentioned like that comms kind of knows what's going on. That's harder with larger departments. So each marketing manager kind of has to look and seek that information because there's not one centralized source. And so we develop relationships among ourselves. When Maggie was hired from Pflugerville, it came up on LinkedIn. And so I love, that there's forums like this one, like Tamio, you're able to connect with other peers from other cities. And so as soon as I saw that she was hired on LinkedIn, like we had coffee. And so we had already established a relationship. But a few of us mentioned, doing the change and doing things based on business need. And so I love marketing and communications. I love public relations. But at the time, it just so happened to be that there was a vacancy. The manager over engagement wasn't filled. And so after having conversations and like knowing your background, knowing what like we've done, Maggie I know has done some engagement too, but I was currently doing it in code compliance. It made sense to position ourselves. And so we both of us talked to our manager as they were restructuring that organization and talked about that business need. And so we put our own personal opinions aside, and for the better of the department, I think that we are now better positioned, and we work really closely together, and that takes communications of like any tools that are developed, she develops, and then anything that has to do with relationship building, she develops. But I think the bigger takeaway that I would say is having those conversations and being open to that change and being able to figure out, well, what's within my span of control, whatever that control means. It might be different between different sizes of municipalities. But for us, and it seems like that's a reoccurring theme among the different challenges that everybody has had, is that taking advantage of those opportunities and taking a look at the business need and being able to vocalize that and build those relationships to be able to communicate that.
Absolutely. when you have gone through kind of these types of restructures, what are some processes, some resources that you put in place to make those effective? So Leanne, if you want to talk about that first.
You're muted, Leanne.
Had to happen at least once.
Oh, yeah, absolutely. Just making sure, and I think Heather would probably be better positioned to answer this question because it's more of a need that I need to fill right now is policies. Creating the policies, who's reporting to who, and getting it down on paper is really important. That's something that I'm constantly working towards. I'm not where I need to be on that. So that's why I kind of want to pitch it over to Heather because I think she's done a really good job with that.
Thanks, Leanne. I think some resources. So as far, I'll do policy and procedure for sure, because that is always my go-to, like, because we didn't do a great job of that when we transitioned to centralized. It was just like, all right, we're centralized, everybody go. But as far as resources go, we didn't even have the staff in place to handle what was going to happen after leadership was like, okay, everybody's centralized. So now everything needs to go through communications and marketing. So that's tip number one for me. It is make sure that you have staff in place. Before we were so passionate and excited about getting it centralized and having this great thing in place, but we didn't have the staff. We were not ready for that yet. Additionally, we also weren't ready because we didn't have, like Leanne was talking about, the policies and the procedures done. We did have our strategic communications plan and we had that audit that I was telling y'all about, but we didn't have any policies and procedures. So if you can imagine, however many hundreds of people now know to go to communications and marketing, even though you don't deal with each one of them, we're still a pretty large organization, but it's like, okay, well, who's actually approving this? Who needs to, what are the chains of command? What can we say? What can we make them do? What can we ask them not to do? So all the policies and procedures and different things on how communications and marketing works amongst themselves and then works externally with the other departments as well is something that that we're good now. But I would just say before any transition, make sure you have a transition plan, or before any restructuring, make sure you think about your policies and your procedures. Additionally, I would add, just as far as resources go, that we put in place to assist with our restructure was monthly marketing meetings, which sounds kind of like, well, of course we would meet with departments monthly, but sometimes I tell people that and they're like, oh, wow, you do that? So I don't know. I just wanted to mention it for anybody who might not be doing that already. We do each marketing person, we have 3. They each are liaison to various departments, and so they meet with them monthly to identify the needs and just talk about all the things. I already talked about the service request form that we do, but that was a really good resource or tool to put in place. Additionally, we have a project management tool. It's called ClickUp. It's very affordable. It's kind of like Monday or Trello if you all have experience with those. But once we centralized, we did not have a tool. Again, we weren't ready. But we got ClickUp in place very, very quickly. It's very easy to use. And like I said, it's affordable. So that's how we manage mostly graphic design requests. And a few other types of projects go in there, especially when we do larger events and stuff like that. We have a brand box that's on our employee information portal, which is our employee intranet. So, putting lots of files and logos and business card order forms and all the things that employees need that relate back to the brand. We have those in there. And then lastly, I will say that we have what's called MAPP, M-A-P-P, and it stands for Marketing and Advertising Public Relations Plan. So when we first started, it was like, you mean we don't get to do our own Facebook posts? You mean we don't get to do our own, we don't get to put flyers up at Shipley's Donuts anymore. Oh my God, what are we going to do? So we had to create these advertising and marketing plans so that people knew that just because we're not going to do flyers in all the donut shops, like we still have a plan. We're strategic. We want to make sure what we do is hitting your audience and it makes sense. So that's another thing. We have a template now. It's like second nature. We can do it in our sleep, but we did have to get that process and that resource created.
Awesome. I want to make sure we leave a few minutes for questions. So just a last comment on restructuring. Do any of y'all have anything else to add about merging, restructuring, and lessons learned from that experience?
I would say just to be patient with your team and yourself during that process, because there's no way to go. It's like marriage or having a kid. Like there's no way to go into it and have all the answers at the outset. You are going to have to learn some things as you go along, and that's okay. So if you are feeling the need or you're being told that a restructure is upon you, it's okay if you don't have all the policies and procedures figured out. It's okay if you don't have a work system yet. You will get there, but be patient and be curious.
All right. I think we're ready to move into questions and answers. So feel free to either use the question feature or the chat to add your questions in. The first question I see we have is, do any of the panelists have any best practices for building your team for smaller cities, like under 10,000 people?
So with Seabrook, we're at 13,000 people, so pretty close to that. And I don't know, Brian, I see you're the Roland, who asked this. I don't really know what city you're in, but if you're a one-person shop, the best practice to do is to start having conversations with management on how to get more people, because communications is not going away, and it really is ridiculous to think that one person can do the job. It is very, very difficult. No matter how talented you are, no matter how many things that you do well, start having those conversations. Build out your dream org chart. Start with one person, maybe in 2026, and then say you need another person in 2027, and justifying it, as we were mentioning earlier, by what are you outsourcing? How many tasks are you getting, and put all of that into some type of plan. That is going to be the best practice that you can do. But then also be realistic, because you are smaller and you're not going to have just this major budget to start adding things. So if you go to your city manager and say, oh, I want 10 people by 2030, that might not be likely. So do keep it realistic. See how you can get other departments to maybe help fund some of that, because they're outsourcing things too. As Heather said, getting people like Parks and Recreation is a great one to kind of bring in. And if it is a small city, I'm assuming that probably PIO functions fall for you for police and fire too. So encouraging them to hire those positions would be really big.
I think also look at what your community is projected to reach at build out. If you're 10,000 people you're going to be built out at 12, that's going to be a different looking plan than your 10,000 people now, but built out at 100,000. So I think you can kind of calibrate your requests based on that, and look at other cities that have your ultimate population, what do their teams look like, and grow in that direction.
And then Heather, Sean's asking, what company did the comms audit for Temple, and how long did that process take?
Well, it was a long time ago. It was Cooksey though, Cooksey Communications, and maybe 6 months, 6 to 8 months, something like that. But they were also, so they did the audit for us, did all the focus groups and everything. Additionally, they helped us build our first strategic communications plan and a community engagement plan. So yeah, there was a lot of foundation building, and they were instrumental in that for us.
And then another question, in a centralized comms team, do website updates land in that team or within different departments?
Good morning. So for Temple, we do have, I think it was Isis was saying, when we request our budget, we request 6 years out. So we have to kind of try and project that out. We have a website coordinator in the business plan for FY27, I think, up until and it keeps getting pushed back But up until we can get that position, what we currently do now, and even when we get that position, departments are still going to have to help because we just have so many websites, one person can't do it all. But we do have a communications and marketing liaison in each department. The department has designated that person. That's who we meet monthly with. And then additionally, they're responsible, or they can assign a proxy to update the website and work with us. And then they'll reach out. So they're primarily responsible. And then they'll reach out to us if they need to restructure some pages or if it's changes that they can't cope with.
I'll add to that, that our department here in Austin has a very technically heavy website because development is that way. And so we utilize a series of, kind of like Heather said, experts throughout the department. And then we have an automated system that emails them quarterly and asks them to check certain information on their assigned web pages to ensure it's accurate. And that has been a highly successful system for us to balance that centralization versus decentralization.
Yeah, we did request a software probably similar to that. And we told finance, even if we can't get the website coordinator, we'd love to at least have that software because it does streamline the editing quite a bit and keeping it accessible and making sure links work and things like that. It kind of manages some of those things for you.
Absolutely. Any other questions? Josh, do you have any questions for us?
I always have questions. So thinking about growing your or evolving your teams relative to your strategic communications plan, do you feel like those are intrinsically linked, or can you do one without the other?
I mean, I think it kind of depends on the person too, who's leading the charge. Like for me, I like a really solid plan and data and action steps, and I like it to be kind of formalized. I don't know if that's answering your question.
Yeah, no, it does.
Okay, yeah, I don't know.
And I think about it from my perspective, the strategic plan that the way we wrote ours, and this is maybe because I'm non-committal, but it says like, hey, here are the things we do, right? And we know we need more resources, and the demand on communications isn't decreasing, it's increasing. So we need more, but we also recognize we're competing against firefighters and police officers and all the other, we run a lean organization anyways, and everybody's understaffed. And so we have we can be content where we are, and realistic about the things we can do and the things we can't do. So we're happy with the size of the team we have, and we're extremely thankful for the resources we've been given. But to take on more, we'd need more.
And I would say to that point too, Josh, for anybody listening, some people are like, oh my God, Temple has so many people. How did you get so many people? That's so amazing. And it really is so amazing. And we're very, very thankful for leadership support. But just my own personal thought or feelings are, no matter how many people we have, we're always going to feel like we need more people because we just keep making more work for ourselves. So for the people who have a small team, I would just say to like, don't always be thinking, oh, I wish we had this person and this person and this person. Like, just build out your priorities based on the strategic goals, and then just do what you can and lock in and focus on that. Because if you're always thinking, I wish we had more people, that's more difficult.
Yeah, that's insatiable. And I was going to mention, so Heather, you mentioned about using a project management platform and different things like that. And I wanted to highlight Chelsea's actually going to do a presentation at the conference on systems like that, because I mean, we would not be able to survive without maximizing the use of technologies. And the reason for that, to your point, to step away from the we need more people idea, we always start with what our responsibility is, our vision and our mission as an individual department. Generally speaking, it's reducing the friction of access to information, right? If the things that we're doing are supporting that, then they're worthy of our time. But that also unlocks us to think about things differently too. We get a lot of, hey, I need a flyer. And we're like, nah, but do you? What is it that you're trying to accomplish, right?
Exactly.
And then back into it that way. that also allows us to tap into, even though we're centralized, to act in a hub and spoke where we can activate people outside of our department to be champions for us as well. So I think just thinking about communications differently, helps take a step back from the we need more people, because that's always going to be true.
Yeah.
We did have another question come in. Maggie, do you want me to read that one? So this is from Liz Ortiz. She said, any successful planning for a broadcast studio? If so, are there specific positions within your department that manage those? Great question.
So we don't have a live broadcast studio, but we do have a really beautiful studio that was built with PEG funds this past year. I know Fort Worth does as well, and I think we'll be touring it during the Tamio conference. So while we are at the end of our time, feel free to reach out and I can give you all of my learned knowledge of that process. And yeah, attend Tamio or connect with our Fort Worth friends because they've gone through that as well.
And I would encourage you, if you're looking at building a studio and recruiting for specific positions, go talk to your local high schools and universities, or community colleges. A lot of them have communications or RTV type programs. They do live broadcasts, and they typically have opportunities for interns where you can cultivate those people and at an affordable rate, and then maybe turn them into full-time jobs. Okay, so that looks like it is about the end of our time. I want to thank everybody, Maggie, and Leanne, the whole panel. Thank you all for taking the time to share your knowledge. You are part of what makes this organization such a fantastic place to be. And so we appreciate all of the thoughtful insights. Everybody that's watching out there, keep an eye out for this webinar. It'll be posted on the Tamio sites in just a couple of days, day or two. And then look out for an email for the next webinar coming up in May, where we're going to be talking to some of our most experienced members about how they experience and go about supporting the budget management process. So marketing budgets and navigating those things. So no, it's a really popular time of year. We just this last Monday had our early budget input session, and we're going to be talking about budget all summer until budget hits in October 1, and then we start again. So we want to get together and ideate on some of those things that help us do that without pulling all of our hair out. And again, register for the conference. We cannot wait to see you all in the beginning of June in Fort Worth. Bring your best cowboy hat and boots for the awards dinner. And we will see you all next month. Thank you, everybody.
Awesome. Thank y'all. Bye.
you.